Do you want to know how to rescue your podcast's noisy audio files? You're in the right place. So I'm here inside of Izotope RX where I do my preparation work before I start editing. For doing audio repair work and any kind of restoration work, it offers a much better way to visualize the waveform, and I can see clearly what's going on inside the frequency spectrum and as to where the problems might be located. I have a system where I tend to split noise reduction up into two different categories. The first is noise floor and the second is intermittent noises. I like to think of them as being completely separate processes. I do them at different stages of the project. When I say noise floor, that is the static background noise that is behind the speech. That's the shh that is happening all the time. So that's things like air conditioning. That can be like the microphone's natural noises that it picks up. So microphones pick up a natural noise floor in and of itself, never mind what it's picking up. So secondly, there's the intermittent noises that pop up now and again. These can be like a cup being put down on the table, like this kind of interruption. It can be like phones beeping. It can be notifications from somebody's computer. It can be a squeaky chair. All those kinds of noises I tend to deal with separate from the background static kind of noises. So for the second type of noise, the intermittent type, a problem that I've seen a lot of times is people trying to deal with those kinds of noises with a default plugin or processing applied to the entire file that can negatively affect the sound quality overall. So I'd stay away from doing that. If you're trying to tackle those intermittent noises, it's going to be pointless. You're trying to do that by trying to process the entire file and hoping that it picks up on those kind of noises. I'd liken it to the kind of airbrushing that you'd see in the photography world. So you wouldn't airbrush an entire picture with the same color. You'd dynamically choose a specific color and then you'd use that wisely. You'd use that in its very specific place that it needed to be used. But where you would use a process and apply it to the entire file would be, say, a photo filter to make the contrast clearer or the colors more vivid. The same thing could be said for the first type of noise example, where we're dealing with the sound as a whole, dealing with the bigger picture. Now, we'll mainly be going into the first example of noise reduction today. That's the static background noise, primarily because that's where I like to start out before I do any editing. It's the first thing that I do when receiving new audio from my clients. I go in and I clean up the background noise, and it makes the editing so much easier. You can transition between sections of audio easier. You can adjust pauses. You can restructure sentences. You can use fades to crop disjointed words. You can even join syllables. All because you're not competing against, say, that air conditioning, for example. The second type of noise that we're discussing, the intermittent kind, we'll be covering that in a later video. So sorry if you're not getting the information that you want out of this one. There'll be another video. As it's a little bit more complex, we'll be dealing with issues as we find them during the editing. So it's best to leave it until we do some editing to discover those, right? But for now, we're just going to deal with the basic static noise cleanup that will help us get started with editing. By zooming in on the waveform, the blue that we can see here is the voice, and then this orange dust-like thing between the blue parts. This is the energy from the noise. So we've got the voice happening, and then between the words we've got the noise. So here in spectral denoise, we can first make sure that adaptive mode is turned off, which means that we're in the learn function. We can select a part of the audio between the words, which is the noise, and we can suggest to Izotope RX that this is the noise. A quick note about the settings. I tend to have the quality as best. Because we're not doing this real time as a plugin inside our DAW, we're going to be doing it as a destructive format. We're going to be saving and rendering out the file. There's really no need for us to be having it on fast quality. We want it on the best. I mean, why would you not want it on the best? Do you want it to be the worst? I don't know. Why would you want it to be the worst? And then the other options, I've got reduction curve turned off. We don't need to be dealing with smoothing. The important feature for me is this artifact control. So you've got two different options. You've got musical noise and you've got gating. Musical noise will choose to remove the noise profile all of the time as a constant, whether the speaker talks or whether they don't talk. It's always going to be taking away the noise profile below the threshold that we've set. So gating will choose to open and shut the operation depending on where we set the threshold. So much like a traditional noise gate, it's going to open and shut depending on what breaches that threshold. With that, some noises might be left apparent when the speaker talks, but then will be removed when the speaker stops. Since I've set the noise profile, I'm mostly going to be choosing musical noise instead of gating. I want to be left with only the voice and for the noise floor to be completely eliminated. In some rare circumstances where a combination of the noise profile and a little too high of a threshold is eating up into the quality of the sound, I'll add a little bit of the problem frequencies back into the speaker's voice by sliding across more into this gated setting. In this example, the noise floor is pretty quiet, but if we left this noise in, we'd certainly hear it once we got to the mastering stage later. The noise floor would be brought up due to the broadcast style compression, and a lot of our edits, which may have seemed pretty smooth until now, will be amplified and they'll all become pretty obvious and revealing. So I find it best to do this process even on files with only light background noise, like what's evident in this example. So what we can do is learn this noise profile. Here we go, it's processed.
Prioritizes selfishness above all else. And I weirdly prioritizes selfishness above all else.
Side note, you might recognize that voice. This is Moby, the famous singer, in an interview with one of my clients from the Ultimate Health podcast. You can check out that interview. Maybe I'll put a link here. Maybe. I don't know. So if you do go check it out, obviously it'll be doing me a favor by keeping the shows that I work for upworthy and relevant in the YouTube feed. So it's all appreciated. Thank you if you do. It's great. So since this file has a pretty low noise floor, let's try with something a bit more louder and a bit more obvious. So here is the hosts file. This is Jesse. Hello, Jesse, if you're watching. So as we can see between the speech and what's going on in blue, and then in between the speech, we've got a bunch of noisy energy. All this that looks like orange dust scattered across the screen. We can see there's something that looks like air conditioning going on at various different loudnesses throughout. So we can see it's probably a bit quieter here, and it gets a bit louder here, and then it gets a bit more quiet here. But all in all, it's pretty much the same frequency response throughout. So if we select a chunk of this orange stuff that's in the gaps between speaking, and we can use the learn function again. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to come over here to output noise only. And then I'm going to start with my threshold low, and I'm going to keep my reduction high. Now I will preview a section, and my goal here is to take away as much noise as possible without encroaching on the vocal frequencies. So I'm going to start low, and I'm going to start raising this high. Again, we're listening to the output noise only, so this is the delta signal. This is the sound that is being taken away from the original sound source. So I'm going to start lifting this threshold slide up, and you will start to hear the voice pop into the spectral preview. So let's just find a section. I can hear that the voice is starting to come through a little. It's at that point where I know that I'm in the ballpark. I'm not sure how much you can hear that in the YouTube example, but for me, I can just about hear where the voice starts. So I'm now going to uncheck the output noise only.
On music at that time?
And now this is going to leave us with just the alpha signal. So just the clean voice without the noise. And then what I'm going to do while previewing is select bypass and flick back and forth with bypass and check that I'm getting rid of the noise, but without destroying the quality of the original voice.
During the day, living in this abandoned warehouse factory, did you have a lot of contact with other humans? I know you'd go visit your mom and stepdad, but were you pretty isolated and just head down working?
Okay. You need to be double sure at this point. Remember, it's been rendered and the rest of the editing will be built on this file, so you really don't want to mess it up. Derp. So now when I'm happy with that and I know that I'm not making the sound worse by having the threshold high, I'm going to be able to just press render, and what we'll see is a lot of this junk between the voice disappear. It may take a little while to render. It's pretty processor intensive work for your computer, and like I said before, I don't like this kind of processing running live, hanging around in the background while I'm trying to do other tasks. In my opinion, it's worth spending that little bit of time right now, rendering it and being done with it. You could use the same settings that we've just done inside of the plugin if you wish. I prefer not to. I prefer to do it here in the standalone app. It's much more efficient for me. So what we're going to see is a bunch of this junk that's happening between the voice is all disappearing. So if I just flick back to the initial state, we can see all the junk that is taken away. And if we just reconfigure the processing again, you can see we've cleaned up the whole spectrum. And hopefully not just visually, it will sound way cleaner and much better too. So there we have it. We've stopped an annoying shh of an air conditioner that would have drastically altered our editing choices had we left it. Remember, if this is all a bit over your head and sounding a little bit too complex, we'll be happy to take that hard work out of your podcasting over at podcasttech.com. So come and join us there. We specialize in all your podcasting production needs, and that includes this kind of rescuing audio, adding that professional touch to assure that you're obviously passionate about doing. Please like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this, pass on the word to your podcasting friends. Maybe we can help them too. I'll be making a part 2 to this video about all those pesky intermittent noises that we talked about earlier, that cup being put down, that squeaky chair, that phone pinging, how to get rid of those kind of things. Subscribing will be the best way to automatically get that video when it drops. You can also help me out by leaving a comment or a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you don't like it, whatever. But maybe you can spread the word on social media. That will go a long way, and I'll appreciate you forever. Thank you. Today, at least, I think I've been Jason Sanderson. Who've you been? And what have been your podcasting challenges? Let us know at podcasttech.com. Thanks. Bye.